RedZone podcast. I am finally back with my boy Rohan. We're going to get to you right now, talk to you 49ers versus Vikings preseason game 2 right after this.
Let's go get him. Let's go get him today, man. Let's go. Hey, dominate on 3. 1, 2, 3, dominate.
How's it going, my man?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Finally feeling good, able to record. I mean, life is good, man. Can't complain.
Hey, and we got football. Football happened yesterday. It was a bit of an interesting game. I'm not going to lie. I got a lot more hype watching UFC last night than the preseason game, but we got a glimpse of football, so that's a good sign.
That UFC fight was legendary. One of the best UFC fights I've ever seen in my life. Ending in the 5th round, last minute, unbelievable. But yeah, right. So we finally got to see some football. Obviously a week away, and for some of you guys, it may be a little bit different in the comment section. You have to be subscribed in order to put a comment down. So make sure y'all do what's best. Hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to hit that like button. So Rohan and I are going to talk a little bit about 49ers versus the Minnesota Vikings preseason game 2. Obviously, they had a joint practice, so it was a little familiar team that they've already been going up against. Let's get straight to it, Rohan. The big talk and the big conversation is obviously some of the DBs, the young DBs on the roster. Let's talk a little bit about what you saw from Samuel Womack, what you saw from guys like the Nominal Lenore and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was very impressed by the DBs. If I'm giving an overall grade to the entire unit, I'd honestly probably give an A or an A minus. The DBs looked good and in all facets of the game yesterday. I mean, you can talk about the splash plays. You got 2 interceptions from George Odom and then from Taylor Hawkins as well at the end of the game. But overall, I was impressed by Womack, who continues to not allow a single catch in this preseason. He started the game in the slot. Obviously worked with the second team last week. Denard got cut this week. He starts the game in the slot against the Vikings. Only played 11 snaps, but I still thought, good sign for Samuel Womack. He's getting that action. And then the rest of the unit, I liked. One very intriguing thing, Deommodore Lenoir. He's getting slot action now, and he looked pretty solid at both slot and outside. And the last thing that I'll say about this group so far that I saw yesterday, tackling. Tackling is a big thing with 49ers and their cornerbacks. So far, I haven't seen too many missed tackles. It's been a pretty solid job wrapping up. Lenoir had a pretty nice tackle, but overall, on those 3-4 yard throws to the flat, to the outside on these slower routes or smaller routes in terms of yardage, 49ers were able to wrap up well, and that's why the Vikings only scored 7 points yesterday.
I obviously think the defensive backs were obviously phenomenal yesterday, especially guys like Tarvarius Moore, who isn't getting much love on the timeline or on Twitter and everything, but I thought he had a lot of run fits that were phenomenal. He even forced a holding call on one of the Vikings receivers or tight ends. I thought he looked pretty solid in coverage, flying around the field, sideline to sideline. I also thought Taylor Hawkins looked pretty well in run fitting. That's a young undrafted free agent rookie who not normally do you see these young guys come up and make tackles in the open field. He came up, he was making tackles. He ended up getting his hands on a ball. Obviously, that was a 50-50 easy catch for him. But you still got to give credit to the young players who are making plays. Demo, he looked like the best corner on the 49ers roster playing last night. I do want to give credit to Samuel Womack. He's just phenomenal. He's always in coverage. His blitz timing is getting down perfect.
Yes.
That's something I did notice. So from week 1, his blitz timing was a little bit off. Week 2, you can kind of see him anticipating the snap and actually jumping at the right time. So that's something I was very intrigued on, actually seeing the growth from Samuel Womack, the blitzing. Another player I did notice who a lot of people were saying could potentially make the roster over a young corner, Ambry Thomas. see a lot of people talking about Tariq Castro Fields and
Mm.
Kadar Coleman. Kadar Coleman is worse than Ambry Thomas. Ambry Thomas could have a terrible training camp, a terrible preseason, but I think Kadar Coleman is that much worse than him. From what I saw yesterday, he just doesn't look like an NFL corner, and that's why he's kind of bounced around the league, which is unfortunate for him. But I think the 49ers are better off keeping Ambry Thomas, stashing him on the injured reserve. If his knee is very serious, you can stash him on the IR right now. And then going to younger guys like Demo. I think Quantress Knight looked very good. A player I want to a player I want to talk about a little bit more is Demo. The growth we've seen from Denominal Lenore from year one to year two has been so drastic in training camp, and it's showing up into the preseason where ends up going into the slot and still shutting people down. What do you see from Demo in terms of being a player?
Yeah. I mean, you talk about the slot. I don't think people realize how difficult it is to go from outside to the slot. It's a different type of game from a cornerback. And for a guy in Diameter Lenore who hasn't gotten any snaps in the slot pretty much the entirety of the year until this past week in practice, to fit in the slot there and then play very well, both in coverage and also as a tackler, I thought that was a good job at Diameter Lenore. He now, I think he obviously is a lock to make the roster, but now you have a bona fide slot, a backup slot cornerback with the 49ers right now. So this is the reason that they felt probably comfortable cutting Darqueze Dennard, because you have a backup slot cornerback in Diameter Lenore who can fill in if Womack gets injured. You've got two top guys there, with Quantress Knight being your practice squad guy. So Lenore and Womack, the intriguing part about them, both of our slot corners on the roster right now, they have flexibility to fit on the outside as well. So I think the 49ers are getting into somewhat of a mold, but overall good game by Lenore. Like you said, the growth, the consistency, most importantly, is certainly there from year one. He isn't he's more technically sound. He isn't as grabby, and despite not necessarily having blazing speed compared to other cornerbacks like Ambry Thomas, who has 4.3 level speed, Diameter Lenore has done well so far.
I 100% agree with you. So now going into other players, right? Obviously, because the defensive backs, usually a lot of times you see defensive backs getting more action than other positions. Um, Absolutely. The
This is
38 is a
true.
little
This is
interesting.
true.
I think he could definitely move on from it. But honestly, it's not the worst number out there. I think he could have had a worse number than 38. But going to other players, right? Because we tend to see a lot of young um, corners and safety struggle during preseason because they're passing the ball more. I want to go to the opposite side, but go to the receivers, right? Because we didn't see any action really from we didn't see much from Danny Gray in terms of production. Ray McLeod. We saw a lot of Tanner Hudson. We saw a lot of tight ends rather than the receiving core. Does that worry you that none of the receiver threes that were actually playing? So guys like Jawan Jennings had a drop. Danny Gray had a drop. Ray McLeod didn't see much action. Does this worry you that there isn't a receiver three stepping up for the 49ers right now?
Not really. So what I mean by that, at least yesterday, it seemed like tight ends were just more featured in the offensive reads. When you looked at it, there were certain plays where you could have hit receivers. The one worrying part is the drops, right? You talk about Jawan Jennings having a drop, Danny Gray having a wide open drop, but I think you saw last week how receivers were featured a good amount more. Danny Gray, obviously, with the 76-yard touchdown, and Ray McLeod being featured as well. This week, McLeod barely played because the 49ers are that confident. I know you said this. McLeod barely played because the 49ers are just confident in him already as a receiver. Jawan Jennings, he was there, but not out there for that long. And so you have the backup level corner or wide receivers. And I think they also were depleted in a way. They didn't. Tay Martin got a little bit of time, but Austin Mack got injured with a hamstring injury. And so you're balancing how many receivers you put out on the field, a lot of two receiver sets. And so tight ends featured a lot more, and they were more safe. One thing that you'll notice, who were the quarterbacks yesterday? They aren't necessarily guys who are looking to air it out a good amount. I'm not saying Trey Lance only throws the ball deep, but they were looking for the easier options, both Nate Sudfeld and Brock Purdy. And it's not thing against them. I thought they moved the ball efficiently yesterday, but they also had averages of 6 yards and I think like 5.5 yards. The reason is they're not necessarily hitting the outside throws, hitting the harder throws, which normally are routes run by receivers, instead looking towards their tight ends, a little more of a safety blanket.
So I absolutely agree. I thought that obviously, like I texted you right away. I was like, yeah, I think Ray McLeod just wasn't featured because of the fact that he's such a lock to make this roster that there's no need to actually play him. I think he is the leader as the receiver 3 right now. I think Kyle Shanahan feels a little bit more comfortable with that speed element for him being the receiver 3. I think Jawan Jennings and him are going to split that role for now until Danny Gray actually takes over that position. I thought Danny Gray missed an opportunity on a drop ball. I also thought he missed an opportunity for a touchdown. And the reason why I say I'm going to come at Danny Gray a little hard right now because you're a young guy trying to make a roster, not necessarily make a roster, but trying to make an impact on a roster year one, right? And when he ran his fade, you cannot allow yourself to get pushed to the sideline. You have to keep full control. You got to keep the sideline as your boundary, as your friend, in order to get that back shoulder throw from your quarterback. He gets the back shoulder throw, and he's too far out to the close to the sideline, which allows the DB to keep pushing to the sideline and make an easy incompletion by just pushing him out of bounds. So I thought two instances, Danny Gray looked like a rookie in terms of the drop pass where he was just trying to get his head up and get extra yards. And then another one on a route getting too close to the sideline. So there's 2 plays where I think could kind of tell being a rookie is going to hurt in terms of making that strong push for receiver 3. I think Malik Turner actually had a solid game. I think he's definitely it's his receiver 6 position to lose at this point.
Yeah.
If Kyle goes 5, I think he's the last man to be cut. I do think, like you said, the reads allowed the tight ends to be featured in this game with the lack of receivers getting open. Tanner Hudson was available. Ross Dwelly was looking good. But I do firmly believe Tanner Hudson is tight end 3, and Charlie Warner is going to end up being tight end 2. I think Tanner Hudson's ability to constantly find the soft spot in zone and be able to beat man with how good of hands he has, I do believe he is tight end 3.
Yeah, and real quick, the last thought for me on the receivers. The reason Jawan Jennings has had a slow count, let's not make mistake in that. But I don't think his snap count will decrease as much as his slow camp indicates, because the biggest thing with Jawan Jennings that he has over every other receiver on the backup list is his blocking ability. There was a play that I saw with Trey Sermon yesterday where Ray McLeod was supposed to block, I believe it was a linebacker, or he was supposed to block one player, couldn't get it. That player then sealed the edge and was able to wrap Trey Sermon for essentially a 1 or 2 yard gain. And to me, Jawan Jennings is there. Sermon's easily able to clear to the edge on that play. And overall, the point being, Jawan Jennings is one of the better run blockers on the team. Brandon Ayuk proved capable as well last year, but you're going to want Jawan Jennings out there on those situations because he has the ability to obviously catch the ball at times while he has had drop issues, but also he has the multifaceted ability. So it doesn't necessarily give away the direction of a certain play, especially in those situations where it could be a run or a pass, especially with the RPO option now that we have Trey Lance. But yeah, go ahead.
So I do agree with you because if we look at one of the plays that I believe it was Trey Sermon running the ball, and I want to say it was Ray-Ray McLeod. I was watching film earlier.
Yeah.
It was Ray-Ray McLeod, and he completely whiffed on a play on a block that most likely Jawan Jennings pancakes the defensive end because he has position on him. Jawan Jennings is a big physical blocker, and I think that's where you get that element of the reason why I say it's a split still between Ray-Ray McLeod and Jawan Jennings in terms of being that receiver 3. I don't think Kyle Shanahan is going to allow Ray-Ray McLeod to run away with it because of his blocking ability. Kyle Shanahan loves receivers that could block, and that's one thing that will allow Jawan Jennings to be on the field.
Realize it was muted, but continuing on with the tight ends, you talk about Tanner Hudson. Tanner Hudson has had a good camp. In my practice reports, I always noted there's one consistency that Tanner Hudson had. He had one big play in a way a day. like 20-yard catch over the middle or something like that. Yesterday, it was more so him being the safety blanket. 5 catches, 43 yards, and he has some of the surest hands despite his one drop yesterday. Some of the surest hands on the team. The one question with him is, can he block to the capacity that the 49ers want? And he's shown that on occasions. He's not the best blocker, I'd say, on the team. I think Charlie Warner is still better. I think you can make maybe the argument that Tyler Kroft might be better. But Hudson has had plays in camp. There was one specific day, I forget which day it was, but he had a nice pancake block, which showcases the potential that he has in that realm. And if he can at least just be average, that'll help the 49ers run game while also providing Trey Lance with a weapon that he has worked with now for the past 2 seasons, because he was on the practice squad. I believe the practice squad last year as well. So, another option for Trey Lance that he could be comfortable with, and the benefit. Both backup quarterbacks seem very comfortable with Tanner Hudson yesterday.
Oh, yeah, Tanner Hudson, he definitely knows how to get open. He's one of those guys, he knows how to find the soft spot in zones. He knows how to use his body in order to box out and get catches. He had one of those on a whip route, or some people call it a whip. Some people call it a quick twirl, depending on what you call it. A lot of offenses call it different, right? But he had a nice whip route that I thought was a beautiful textbook, use your body kind of catch to get the first down. So I do give him a lot of credit for what he put on display yesterday. I think what he was able to do yesterday just shows he's capable of being that receiving tight end for the offense to have to put with George Kittle. But I do want to go into, obviously, the main discussion, the main topic, the main conversation. Not the running backs, the quarterbacks, right? There's a quarterback controversy going down in San Francisco. Is it going to be Jimmy Garoppolo, or is it going to be Trey Lance? Is it going to be Brock Purdy starting at quarterback? Or who knows? It might be Nate Sudfeld from Modesto, California, where I live, that's going to be starting for the 49ers. What's going on at quarterback, Rohan? There's a quarterback controversy, man.
Yeah, there is no quarterback controversy. And I don't even think, obviously the question is, who's the quarterback 2? But I've said it steadfastly this offseason, and I'm going to continue with it. There is one quarterback 2 on this roster and one quarterback 3. And that doesn't mean because of talent. That means just because of the overall picture. Nate Sudfeld is quarterback 2. In my opinion, he proved that yesterday. Had a fairly solid day, 13 of 17, 102 yards, threw for 6 yards per attempt. He threw the touchdown pass as well, and he was able to efficiently lead the offense on certain drives, right? Obviously, some of the earlier drives stalled because of a lack of pass protection, because of a lack of running backs able to move the ball early, and because of drops. But overall, I do think that it is Nate Sudfeld's job to lose, and I think he's done a fairly good job so far. He's the one quarterback apart from Trey Lance that can push the ball downfield at times. His arm strength looks better than last offseason, was something that I heard, and I think that that's true. Whereas Brock Purdy, the arm isn't necessarily there, but it's not that I don't like Brock Purdy. I think his pocket presence is one of the better attributes of his entire profile. It's just he doesn't have a strong arm, and I think both of them are fairly accurate when also hitting the check down. So you got to go with what Nate Sudfeld provides over Brock Purdy. And the biggest thing, who's getting paid $2 million? Nate Sudfeld's getting paid $2 million. I don't think the 49ers cut him and eat that money for that reason. I think Brock Purdy will end up being a fine backup. But right now, I think he is a practice squad guy. It's been Sudfeld's job. 49ers have spoke about his mind, especially Trey Lance. And, as long as he continues to perform all right, he's going to be fine.
I think Brock Purdy, and obviously there's no quarterback controversy. I was just joking. I don't want anyone to think I'm actually being serious. It's more so like being sarcastic in terms of what the quarterback controversy is. But there's a little bit of quarterback 2 controversy in terms of you hardly see teams split reps the way the 49ers did. And it just shows how good Brock Purdy has been throughout training camp, even though his lack of arm strength, his lack of size and stuff like that. I mean, he knows his IQ and the processing skills that he has allows him to make up for that arm strength. I think Brock Purdy had a solid game yesterday. I thought so did Nate Sudfeld. But like you say, the $2 million that's fully guaranteed to Nate Sudfeld is the reason I do not see the 49ers keeping Brock Purdy. Now, I think it's a hell of a job for Brock Purdy to be Mr. Irrelevant and putting himself in a situation to actually compete for quarterback 2 against a quarterback who's been in the league for a few years and making $2 million fully guaranteed. One thing I did notice about Nate Sudfeld is he doesn't allow his entire reads to develop. He doesn't allow every route to develop, which is one of the things I do like with Brock Purdy because he has this toughness that he will stand in the pocket, take a shot on the chin to deliver a ball to allow routes to develop. And when you watch Nate Sudfeld, first read that's open, he's going there. And a lot of the times it's the right read. But I like to see quarterbacks allow routes to develop. And sometimes when you allow routes to develop, you can't come back to that first read because that's going to be gone. So you better hope one of the reads is there, or else you're going to get the similar situation that we saw Brock Purdy in a few times. The first read's there. He goes to a second read, hoping that a bigger play is going to happen, and now he's having to scramble and having to try to lower his shoulders into linebackers. And you don't want to see quarterbacks do that ever. Another thing, the reason why I think there's the quarterback competition for QB2 is in favor of Nate Sudfeld right now is because he understands the play action game. He understands how to sell a play fake, unlike Brock Purdy, to the point where Brock Purdy is doing a play fake, but he's not really because he's not showing the ball. He just real quick show ball, pull out. Where in terms of you see Nate Sudfeld, you see him under control, show the ball for a long while, pull late, and then get the offense going. And that just shows a young rookie's mind is just so sped up. I want to get to my reads. So I do think Kyle Shanahan is going to lean veteran in terms of what the veteran provides in terms of being relaxed and calm for an offense.
CJ Gray, real quick, says, we're going to have 3 quarterbacks, and this has been a debate that I've seen on the timeline. Do you think the 49ers can afford to roster 3 quarterbacks on the 53-man roster, or do you and the other thing is Jimmy Garoppolo, this could be unexpected, but the 49ers don't have to cut him necessarily till September 10th, where his contract would then be fully guaranteed. In some way or the other, do you think the 49ers can afford to roster 3 quarterbacks with the amount of depth they have elsewhere?
I don't. I really don't. I think that you have to keep 2. I don't think you can keep 3. And the reason is like you say, there's depth in so many other positions. The only way I could see them doing it is if they decide to keep 5 receivers and not keep 6, right? I do think they're going to keep 6, but if they decide to keep only 5 receivers, then you have the ability to keep that third quarterback. But even then, if you keep 5 receivers, you could keep that an extra running back. A lot of people don't want Jordan Mason to go. You could keep Jordan Mason, and that conversation will come in a little bit, but you could keep those. You could keep an extra
guy anywhere. Yeah, extra linebacker, extra defensive back.
Defensive lineman. I mean, the room is so deep in a lot of these positions that if you do keep a third quarterback, you lose on depth in other positions, which I don't think the 49ers should do so. I think if you're going to have 3 quarterbacks and lose depth, it doesn't make sense in terms of what the 49ers should have. I also do want to say, if you are tuned in to the 49ers Red Zone, make sure you go subscribe to Rohan's personal channel. If you're on Rohan's personal channel, also do the favor and subscribe to the 49ers Red Zone podcast channel. I would highly appreciate it. But like you say, Rohan, is it smart roster building to keep 3 quarterbacks? Because if you do keep a third quarterback, is Nate Sudfeld going to win you anything? Is Brock Purdy going to win you anything? Absolutely not. So why would you keep 2 quarterbacks that don't move the needle for your roster?
Yeah, that's the main thing. Like, if you're just talking about pure talent, right? Do you think Malik Turner or Brock Purdy would have more impact on your roster right now? And this is in mind. Danny Gray, he's a good receiver, but he's still working as a rookie. I think Malik Turner is honestly better than him right now at the role that Danny Gray plays. Or do you want to keep an 11th defensive lineman? Or, you said it, running back. Do you think Jordan Mason is more valuable to this team right now, or is Brock Purdy? That's these are the discussions that you have. And Kyle Shanahan has kept 3 quarterbacks in the past. We've seen it with the Garoppolo, Beathard, Mullins, or Garoppolo. Forget who the other guy was. Garoppolo, Beathard, and there was another guy back then. But you've taken 3 quarterbacks before. But the roster, you saw last year, the 49ers put Nate Sudfeld on the practice squad. because they had so much depth elsewhere. And this is a roster with even more depth now. I think it would be unfeasible. And I honestly think it would not be good roster building if you were to do so, because both of them, I saw Grant say this yesterday on a clip. Grant said both of them are closer to wide or quarterback number 3s in the league than quarterback number 2s. And while I don't necessarily agree that both of them are closer to quarterback 3s, like a top 90 quarterback instead of a top 60 quarterback, they're not high-end quarterback 2s by any means. They're not low-end starters by any means. And so to me, that's why I'd prefer you keep a player at a different position as opposed to rostering a third quarterback.
No, I absolutely 100% agree with you, because even if you keep a guy like Malik Turner, right, the sixth receiver instead of a quarterback, he's going to impact the game in special teams, even if he's not impacting the game in the receiving standpoint. Yeah. Same thing with Jordan Mason. Jordan Mason's also a special teamer, so if you keep one of those players over a third quarterback, it allows you to do more with your entire roster instead of keeping an extra quarterback that most likely will never see the field. And even if they do, you're in a lost season, and you're probably going to be losing majority of your games if you're going to your third quarterback or your second quarterback. I think there's a possibility you could try to stash Brock Purdy on the practice squad. I mean, he looks good. Will anyone really sign Mr. Irrelevant? Even if he had a great preseason, will they put that his preseason was because he was playing against third stringers, fourth stringers in the NFL? That could be something Kyle Shanahan talks about with John Lynch and says, hey, this guy was Mr. Irrelevant for a reason. Let's cut him, bring him back to our practice squad. He'll be one of the guys that majority of the weeks you could put where teams cannot claim that player. You could do that to Brock Purdy as many times as you can, and so when other teams don't sign him. But I think it's not the smartest idea to do. I mean, I could get why Kyle Shanahan might want to, but if I'm looking at Kyle Shanahan and I'm John Lynch, I'm Adam Peters, I'm saying, Kyle, you have an opportunity to keep an extra defensive lineman. You have an opportunity to keep an extra corner or something. Don't do the wrong move. We get Brock Purdy is smart, but Brock Purdy isn't going to beat Trey Lance out over the next couple of years. You don't need backup quarterbacks that are high-level backup quarterbacks if you have the right quarterback that is starting. Going into the position, I see a lot of comments about a certain player on the 49ers.
Yeah, I know. Jimmy Garoppolo.
I do see a lot of comments about Jimmy Garoppolo. And for me, I think it's very fascinating because I did see it on the timeline this morning as well. Appreciate you, Zach. So it is interesting because I just see on the timeline a lot that everyone's like, oh, maybe they keep Jimmy Garoppolo. No, that $25 million is so much more valuable to have midseason if you need to sign.
Let's get to the real topic of the day. Trey Sermon.
I was actually talking about Jimmy Garoppolo, though, because there is too many people talking about it. But I was hoping you would change the subject and not go there, because I didn't want to go down a dark alley and really have to talk about Jimmy Garoppolo right now. So I thank you. Trey Sermon, right?
We hear you. Trey Sermon.
Like Callie says, everyone wants to hear the Trey Sermon talk. Straight up, I'm going to ask it. Do you see Trey Sermon getting cut?
No, I don't.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask you another question. Last night, the run game that Trey Sermon had, 5 carries, was the limited production due to Trey Sermon, or was it due to the offensive line and no creasing or no run lanes that were actually there?
Both, mostly though, on the offensive line. Guys, it was five carries yesterday. It wasn't like 50 carries that you have a huge sample size to judge on where you can see different things. And in those 5 carries, you could make an argument that in all 5 carries, there was just no hole to run on, where whether it be blocks just not unfolding, like on the Ray McLeod play that we talked about earlier, or whether it be Sermon actually hitting the hole and just not getting a gain out of it because the defense closed. This is your second team offensive line. And I understand your first team offensive line will go against first team defenses, but you're trusting that the first team level players will play a fairly good role. There's a reason that you've had these first team tackles in Williams and McGlinchey, and the run game has flourished primarily to the outside, even against first team defenses. And so that's the difference right now. The run game didn't materialize with Trey Sermon on those 5 carries because there wasn't any place to run. And yes, could he have been decisive on some plays? Yeah, he probably could. I looked at one play where he could have been a little more decisive, but also it's just sometimes in the offense you want to wait for the holds to materialize so that you can shoot the gap and get a head start on it. And then there are some plays where you want to shoot the gap immediately. And so to me, I don't blame Trey Sermon as much. I didn't think he had a bad game as many indicated. However, the one thing I'll say about Trey Sermon is he looks slower than he did in the first game and that he did in training camp in general. And I attribute that probably to his ankle injury that he suffered. The last part about Trey Sermon, before the ankle injury this week, during joint practices, Elijah Mitchell did not practice again this week. Trey Sermon was RB1. Trey Sermon was the guy getting the most carries, and Trey Sermon, when he was playing with the first team offense, looked better. This upcoming week, you're going to see Trey Sermon play again with that first team offense. Trent Williams will likely be out there for a couple of series, which hasn't been the case this offseason. Remember, the 49ers flourish more when running outside of the tackles or running to in between a tackle and a guard, not in between guard and center. At least that's been the case in the prior years. Now you're returning Trent Williams, and while Colton McKivitz will be on the right side, you're going to have a little more stability on the offensive line, and that should help out the running game, especially with Trey Sermon.
So I understand that many are going to say, and this is nothing against Zach, all right? Mason made things happen. He didn't have gaping holes. So actually, I went back and watched every single Jordan Mason carry. I'm a very big Jordan Mason fan. I've been a very big Jordan Mason fan since the 49ers signed him as an undrafted free agent because I was actually watching a Georgia Tech player on the defensive side, and I kept just watching their offense. There was actually a lot of running space for Jordan Mason during his runs. Even on his big 17-yard carry, he had a pretty decent size hole. It might not look like a big hole, but at NFL standards, those are huge holes that he is getting in terms of what he has to work with. Now, on some of them, he didn't have nothing. He's falling forward, and he is getting those extra 2 yards that he wouldn't have got without him falling forward. So that is something that I do see with Jordan Mason, but he did have much bigger holes than Trey Sermon. Now, like Rohan says, is Trey Sermon's ankle looked like it could be a very big factor in terms of his explosion. His decisiveness, I didn't see nothing wrong with him being decisive or anything. When there's nothing there and you have 5 guys in your face or you have 2 guys in your face and you're trying to make one miss behind the line of scrimmage, I do not mind you doing so because there is no rushing lane for you to do that. Now, what I do want to see from Trey Sermon is catch the damn ball, right? You have the opportunity to catch the ball. Catch the damn ball. And that's the one thing I will say about Trey Sermon yesterday. That is out of the 5 plays, I saw one play where I thought he could have hit the hole a little bit harder. It was his biggest run. He picked up 3 yards. I thought he could have hit the hole harder and gotten 5 yards. Outside of that, his only other play was the drop. Now, for me, my biggest thing is you have to have a hole in order to run. Same thing, for example, like TDP. TDP had a small hole on the 4th and 1. He didn't trust what he saw. Instead, he bounced it to the outside, not thinking that he thought he was fast enough. But you got to realize the NFL is so fast, you're not going to be able to get to the outside every time, especially being a bigger guy who's slower like TDP. He gets tackled for a loss. 49ers have to turn over on downs. So for me, I thought if Trey Sermon would have been in on that 4th and 1, I think he picks up that 4th down. I think he hits that hole straight and he gets the 4th down. Just stuff like that. Just looking at the holes that Jordan Mason got. I think if Trey Sermon gets those holes, I think he hits them hard. I think he picks up yards. But I think the biggest thing is hoping his ankle gets healthy and seeing him with the first team. I do not think he's going to be cut by any means, especially because we're seeing him with no rush lanes, and he's a 3rd-round draft pick. I mean, at the end of the day, you don't give up on your 3rd-round draft pick after year 1.
Yeah. And the one part about let's give everybody else their flowers because a couple of running backs did have good days. JaMychal Hasty had 3 carries for 15 yards. Had a drop pass though. But TDP and TDP and Jordan Mason both had good games. TDP caught fire in the second half, right? Had runs of 12 yards, had runs of 14 yards. And when that hole is present and TDP hits it and goes downhill, you see the potential that's there because the acceleration is there and he lays the shoulder. His power is certainly there as well. Whereas Jordan Mason, he's one of the more decisive players. He just runs downfield. You never have to worry about him dancing. That hasn't been a thing. Jordan Mason is, he might be one of the more pro-ready backs on the team in just an overall, including Elijah Mitchell. He might be one of the more pro-ready backs overall. And so Jordan Mason yesterday, great, just a great game overall. It's against third teamers, which is important to note. But Jordan Mason has done a solid job overall, and he should make this roster, don't you think?
Absolutely. I think you cannot by any means allow Jordan Mason to be on another roster. Now it comes down to a hard decision. Who do you cut to keep Jordan Mason? And Jordan Mason wasn't just doing this in preseason. He did this in training camp.
He's been doing it in training camp.
The first day I seen him in training camp, right away, my notes is Jordan Mason is an NFL back. Instantly what I wrote. When I watched him during his Georgia Tech days, because I was watching film on one of their linebackers, first thing I saw was runs the ball like beast mode. I don't know if you guys remember Marshawn Lynch. He's a hard guy to bring down. He's going to lower his shoulders on you, and he's going to get every single yard he possibly can. And like you said about TDP, just to real quick go back about on TDP, you said TDP caught fire in the second half, right? So what happens with running backs is in order for you to start getting a feel of a game, you have to get the ball a good amount of time. You have to get a feel for the game on how these linebackers are fitting the run, how the defensive line is defending the run and their gap system, and are they two gapping? Are they one gapping? Are they slanting down? You have to look at stuff like that as a running back. And when you only get 5 carries, you only get 2 carries in a preseason game, and you're not getting much carries, you're not going to be very productive. Same thing with TDP and why he looked unproductive the first half and why he was struggling, because he didn't have an understanding of how they were trying to defend the 49ers offense. Now, watching Jordan Mason, he has an understanding of this offense because the Georgia Tech offense is a very similar offense in terms of you get north and south. I don't care what you're doing. You're going straight, pound the ball down their throat. Do not try to dance. Lower your shoulders because you're bigger than a lot of these dudes in the ACC. Get us the yards you need. We need 3.5 to 4 yards to carry. That's all we're asking from you. And he does just that. And when you're running so hard, you're going to make dudes miss. And when you have that speed, you're going to make these guys miss tackles, and it makes you look even better. But I want to talk a little bit about the guys you cut, because obviously you have JaMychal Hasty. You have Jeff Wilson Jr., right? These are good running backs that are on the 49ers roster. These are good running backs. I'm not saying they're not good running backs, but I think JaMychal Hasty lost out on a starting position or a roster spot with his stupid special team error preseason game 1. You know that you've been in the league for a few years. You can't do that, especially when you're probably going to be contributing the most on special teams as a kick returner or possibly a punt returner. He makes a boneheaded mistake preseason game 1. Now, Jeff Wilson Jr., I want to ask a lot of people in the comments. I want to see your answer, yes or no. Okay, it's all I want to see. Do you believe that Jordan Mason could do what Jeff Wilson Jr. can do? Majority of the people will probably say yes. I mean, Rohan, what do you think? Can Jordan Mason do what Jeff Wilson does?
This has been my argument the entire offseason. And really, before the offseason, when we were talking about Jordan Mason, the reason that I've not necessarily predicted, but gave the reason for why Jordan Mason could make this 53-man roster is because he's a replica of Jeff Wilson Jr., who runs powerfully, but at least has the body to run powerfully and stay durable. He was underutilized, like you mentioned, at Georgia Tech. He's got more tread on his legs, and his frame makes it so that he's less likely to get injured compared to Jeff Wilson Jr., who has faced his fair share of injuries in the NFL, right? And so to me, Jeff Wilson Jr., when you talk about Jeff Wilson Jr., he's a good running back. He is shown capable of being a lead back in the offense. That was before his before his injury. But Jordan Mason, he catches passes. He's able to run fairly hard. He's a downfield runner, and he looks pro ready. And so to me, them two are similar backs. The only difference is Jordan Mason is a little more bulkier while also running with the same speed, if not even faster than Jeff Wilson Jr. right now. And so to me, it's a hard debate in terms of who do you keep sometimes, but Jordan Mason has shown enough. The only question right now with Jordan Mason is how does he fare in pass protection? Because Jeff Wilson Jr. has shown that he can pick up in pass protection at times, and that's the main necessity of that third down back, which the 49ers right now seem to be lacking because running backs continue to drop passes. Trey Sermon dropped one yesterday. Hasty, or no, who was he? Was it Hasty, the other one that dropped pass yesterday?
TDP dropped one, I will say, last week, I believe, or it might have been
TDP
yesterday.
did drop one last week, and TDP has dropped passes all camp too.
All camp.
Yeah. So like Mitchell has also dropped a pass in camp in general. So you don't know who that guy is. And so to me, who can pass protect? Is it Hasty? Hasty did have, I think he had one nice pass protection play yesterday that I saw on film, but can Mason pass protect? That's the one question about him, because apart from that, he's a replica of Jeff Wilson Jr. with probably a little more muscle and added bulk.
I think it's going to be a super hard decision. Like someone in the like Zach says, plain and simple, Kyle has a hard choice to make when it comes to this roster, and I think that's the best way to say it, right? Because this is the deepest roster I've seen Kyle Shanahan have, and it's the hardest roster I've had for myself in order to make a 53-man roster. Over the last couple of years, I've been pretty accurate in terms of I've been like the 80 to 90% range in terms of having a 53-man roster. This year, I don't even think I'm going to be 70% accurate in terms of who's going to make the roster, because the 49ers could keep this player, they could keep this player. But the thing is, it's what they value in terms of running backs. And with the change of system, and not necessarily a system, but the change of philosophy in running backs, right? Once Anthony Lynn gets here, we see a trend switch. They draft TDP, a bigger running back. They bring in Jordan Mason, a bigger style of running back, right? So they bring in these it's a shift, starting to become bigger guys, but guys that Anthony Lynn likes, guys that actually, if we look back in the day with Mike Shanahan, the kind of same running backs that Mike Shanahan would pick up, Kyle Shanahan has worked with Alfred Morris, who was a bigger back, faster guy. So it's a trend that they're kind of, hey, you know what? We do notice that a lot of our running backs, when they're smaller, they're in our outside zone system, they're gonna get more one-on-one opportunities with these linebackers that are bigger than them. And if we have running backs that could actually take on a pounding from a linebacker, it allows you to have a more successful season, a more successful year from each running back. So I think that's kind of what they're going towards is more so looking at the running back. So I think that's why Jordan Mason and Trey Sermon have the edge on Jeff Wilson Jr. And the reason, I'll also throw this out there too, the reason why, shout out to my boy Chris, the reason why they have the edge on him is because of their roster control for the next 2 to 3 years, right?
Yeah.
3 to 4 years, whatever we want to put it. Jordan Mason being on the 49ers roster for the next 3 to 4 years is way more impactful than a year of Jeff Wilson Jr., who might not even be healthy. I don't think I've ever seen a year of Jeff Wilson Jr. being fully healthy the entire year. So for me, I would rather go with the young Jordan Mason, who has less thread on his tires, less injury history, and allow him to be your third or fourth running back. Whether people see Trey Sermon and him being 3 and 4, it's fine with me. I totally get it. The disappointment in a third round running back and wanting him to take off. The thing is, the 49ers are getting undrafted free agents. They're getting players in the 6th round to replace these running backs. So I don't mind, because all drafts are the same. We can look at every team's draft and say they missed here, they could have gone there, they could have gone there. So I don't really put too much stock into where these players are drafted or where they're got from the 49ers. The fact that they're able to bring in these undrafted free agents that can contribute immediately is very impactful when you have a young roster with a young quarterback.
And the last thing I want to say about the running backs, because you talk about the the complexion of the room, right? In terms of some guys are built bigger, which fits the current system, more inside zone, more power scheme. The one thing I want to say, something I could envision happening if Jordan Mason makes the roster, because his uncertainty is in pass protection right now. If the 49ers are in third and medium or third and short, they always have the potential of running the football, which means Tyrion Davis-Price, a guy who was known to be a pass blocker in college, could be out in the field because you threaten the ability, the RPO play, threaten play action, and you have a guy who can block. And then in longer distances, you might need a running back that can catch the ball. You throw Jordan Mason or Elijah Mitchell out there for that type of instance, who can work after the catch and also be sure-handed pretty much.
And I 100% agree with you, but you also could, at the same time, Trey Sermon is a better receiver than what he put on tape yesterday, right? Everyone's going to trash him as much as they want. He is a solid receiver out of the backfield. And I want everyone to do me a big favor, right? Go back to the Seattle Seahawks game last year where Trey Sermon started. Trey Sermon looked like a way different running back once Trey Lance comes into that game. You look at Trey Sermon's reps with Jimmy Garoppolo, they're solid. But at that moment, Trey Lance comes into the game, you could see a big switch into his running style and how he's actually pounding the ball. During
19
that
carries,
game,
89 yards, big time
19,
stats.
he was averaging around 5 yards to carry that game, and then his longest run that game was 15 yards. So that's something that he's capable of doing. I do remember even the game against the Jacksonville Jaguars last year. He had a reception. I want to say it went about 20 to 25 yards. It might have been a little bit longer, but he has the ability to catch passes out of the backfield. So I think this is a reason we should pump the brakes a little bit on Trey Sermon, because one, like me and Rohan said, the run blocking wasn't there. Two, he has shown the ability to do so in actual NFL games with the first team offense when Trey Lance is out there. So to be able to see that and understand the ability that he has with Trey Lance, because I do firmly believe that Trey Sermon was drafted for Trey Lance. I do not believe he was drafted for Jimmy Garoppolo or the system. I believe he's drafted for that RPO system, that run pass option, or even that zone read style of running. I think Trey Sermon would be a bigger impact of player with Trey Lance than in a regular Kyle Shanahan system.
And the last thing I want to say about Trey Sermon is you talk about the ability, but we got to also factor in something we said earlier: injury. Hold reservations until Trey Sermon's ankle heals, where he will likely play with the first team. If Elijah Mitchell can't go again this week, he will likely play with the first team on Thursday against a first team defense. Who are we playing? Houston, right? Against the Houston first team defense. That should give us a good final look at what Trey Sermon is like before the regular season starts. Can he be more decisive? Can he take the holes that he's given? Does he dance? Those are all questions that'll be asked and answered during that game. And that kind of leads us to our final topic of the day that I want to ask you about, because they played very well yesterday. I want to see who your standouts were and what you think about this specific player from this question. Javon Kinlaw on the defensive line. Go for it. Give me your thoughts.
I knew you're coming to that question. I think Javon Kinlaw had a phenomenal game in terms of getting to the quarterback in one-on-one situations. I thought he put it together some beautiful reps. He had a beautiful club rep that he ended up getting the sack on. I thought that looked phenomenal. He also had a bull rush one-on-one. He took on a couple of double teams that he still impacted the pocket. It's like you don't see defensive linemen doing stuff like that. So I thought that was phenomenal to see. A player that I really thought stood out outside of Javon Kinlaw, though, I would probably go, in my opinion, the biggest standout from what I was looking for probably has to be Tanner Hudson. I was just watching the game, rewatched it. Tanner Hudson. I do want to give Nick Sakel his flowers, though, because he did have some pretty nice pass pro reps. He had some nice run blocking reps in terms of what I was kind of looking for from him. Looked better than when I saw him in training camp. So that is a positive sign for a young rookie. You take every win you can as a young guy. Um, Anyone else that stood out? Probably Taylor, or probably Tarvarius Moore if the third guy. Tarvarius Moore being the third guy because of how he was fitting the run and how he looked actually moving. I thought his speed looked finally back to what I saw in training camp. Training camp looked faster than he looked in week one. But again, people are gonna look at that week one play where he gets burned by Romeo Dubes and gives up a touchdown. So that's kind of gonna weigh. So
Hey, he might not have a good game. He might not even be healthy. We'll see. But I'm
hey,
confident
here
right now.
I'll do this. So I'm gonna keep that up there, and I'll say if he flames out, you could change my header. If he has a terrible, absolute terrible game, but it has to be agreeable between you and I, Kelly. I'll let you change my avatar on Twitter to whatever
Oh
you
no.
want.
Oh no. I'm not going to agree to that because he might be injured. He might not even play. But
But that's the thing. If he doesn't play,
yeah,
it doesn't count. But I say if
I
he plays,
guess.
but it has to be an agreeable. It has to say like if on certain things. So it can't be where he has like 10 carries and he has 40 yards. It's a solid game. Yeah, 40 yards per carry. That's a solid game. But
Right.
then Callie can't be like, oh, he plays shitty. You know what I mean? So like it has to be like, okay, it has to be like you can't just say he plays shitty and then you know what I mean, and he had a decent game.
Yeah. And talking about the defensive line, going back to that, one other standout for me that you didn't mention, Jordan not Jordan, Drake Jackson had a very good game yesterday in my opinion. Couple of pressures, got the pass deflection that was a near interception. And really, this defensive line is just going like you see how the backups operate. I know it's against a group of backups as well, but to see the backups operate well, Omenahue had a pressure and a run stop. Jordan Willis had a nice pressure, hitting Sean Mannion's arm on a throw. Drake Jackson had a couple of pressures himself, a nice run stop as well. And he also had the deflected pass. Like the entire unit is looking good. We saw Toure flash last week. We're seeing a couple of other guys flash this week. Just speaks to the depth that we have on this team.
So I really want to read this comment before I know Rohan has to get out of here in a few minutes. So Kinlaw looks promising. Those he's a bust sentiments are becoming rarer as expected. Fans becoming prisoner of the moment and don't like to have things play out. Um, this comment to me is important because I think it kind of does something with Trey Sermon as well. I mean, after looking at a young rookie, a young player, after 1 year, and us saying, "Oh, he needs to be gone," or looking at preseason games, "Oh, he needs to be gone." Every rookie takes a few years to get into their own in the NFL. They don't come in year one and be straight animals. They don't come in 6 round picks and be Elijah Mitchell. That's unheard of. That's you hardly see that happen. Look at Jimmy Ward. Look at Arik Armstead. There's a lot of examples on the 49ers roster. Bosa is an exception because he's a number 2 overall pick, right? You expect that from him. So I think let's hold a little bit of the busts and these labels on these young players, and even in terms of saying, "Oh, this guy looks great." Even like for me, it's hard for me to say Drake Jackson looks amazing or great. I think he looks solid, but for like a lot of people out there on the timeline are saying, "Oh, he looks great." I can't say that because it's his first year. If I put that
And like
expectation
I
on
said,
him,
not playing against the first team defense right now, right? He's playing primarily with the second team. And even in training camp, when I said that one day where he had 3 or 4 pressures on a day, it was against second and third teamers. So there are always reservations with that kind of stuff. But continue.
no, exactly. So like I'm just trying to like put this perspective for these players because a lot of times we forget that they're going through injuries, right? They're humans. When they go through injuries, they go through depression because football is all they usually have, right? Besides their family, football is their life. So they go through these depression, they go through stuff, and they have to work their way back. So I think Trey Sermon will be fine. I think Kyle Shanahan understands that. So I'm looking forward to seeing the young rookies grow, the young second year players grow, and see what they actually have. And I think putting all this into perspective because we see Kinlaw having a decent time right now. I see Arik Armstead having a great career now after being labeled a bust by a lot of people. And same thing with Jimmy Ward, right? So I think We have to just let these young players mature into their own bodies and into the NFL.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that big statement is a great way to end today's show because that is the biggest part about them all. Exercise patience. I understand. The 49ers are a team that are in the mix for the last couple of years. So exercise patience with the young guys while also seeing the potential that they have and understanding why the 49ers, what the 49ers see in them. That's another thing. Great to see Javon Kinlaw kind of getting into his own realm. That was obviously he had high expectations coming in. I just saw a comment, but Kinlaw, right? Traded essentially for DeForest Buckner, an all-pro, one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. And while Kinlaw has had an injury, you see the potential. Great move for his sack yesterday. And last week, the one thing I said about Kinlaw, what was his good part? Availability. We just needed the production now to match the availability because it is tough. We don't see Mike McGlinchey out there at all. We don't see other guys coming from injury out there at all. And so now you're seeing Javon Kinlaw out there, and he's playing so much time. And he finally got the production yesterday, getting the sack, being a force there on the defensive line.
So that's it for today's episode. Thank you guys all for tuning in. And make sure you guys go subscribe to both channels, the 49ers Red Zone podcast on YouTube and Rohan's personal podcast on his YouTube channel. Make sure you guys do that. Make sure you guys hit that like button, subscribe to both, and make sure you're following both of us on Twitter. Thank you guys for tuning in today.